بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا وأبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني من نور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Ayatullah Mutahhari refers very much to the book لؤلؤ و مرجان در آداب پله اول و دوم منبر, about the etiquette of منبر. Mirza Hussein Noori Rizwanullah Ta'ala alayhi, in the first, this book has 2 chapters. In the first chapter it talks about sincerity, about ikhlas. The first condition of a speaker, of a khatib, of someone who goes and gives lectures on minbar, is sincerity. It should not be for any worldly reason. The second condition, so the first step is like in Pallaya Awwal, the first step is sincerity. The second is truthfulness. You have to be very careful about not telling anything which is wrong or false or baseless. And he has very detailed discussion about lies, different types of lies. And Ayatullah Mutahhari says, I have not seen any book that has such a scholarly and detailed discussion about lies. Why he explains so much about lies? Because if we don't know what can be a lie, then we may also say sometimes a lie. There is a saying in Arabic, it's very interesting. It says, "Kafa bil mar'i kizban an yuhadditha bi kulli ma sami'a." It is sufficient to make you a liar if you report whatever you hear. If whatever you hear, you say, you don't need to start the lie. But you hear something, you tell to other people. You read something, you tell to other people. Then definitely you are a liar, because many of these things are baseless. If you don't want to be a liar, don't say things that you have heard or read unless you check them. Yeah, sometimes we are free soldiers for bad propaganda. They use us to spread things. Even sometimes, maybe you are sad, say, have you heard this? But you yourself are, sharing again the same thing. So Haji Noori has detailed discussion about different types of lies, and then he says that unfortunately many lies have been said about the story of Karbala. These can be inaccuracies, these can be exaggerations, but this can also be baseless claims that some people have said, and sometimes they are repeated. And even Haji Noori goes to this stage of saying, he says, today we need to mourn for Imam Hussein alayhi salam for a second reason, not just for being killed by oppressors, for being misrepresented and many lies being said about him. He said, this is the musibah of today. Haji Nuri says this. In the introduction to the book, he says, one alim from India has written a letter to me, and he complained about some of the mistaken things that which are said in his place. And he has asked me to write a book to stop this. But he says, unfortunately, he doesn't know that some of these lies are going from here, from Iraq or Iran there. It's not that they are produced locally. So problem is well spread, unfortunately. This is what he says. Of course, alhamdulillah, in the last decades, lots of improvement have been done, lots of scholarly works have been done. This is at his time. But still we need to be careful. He says some of these issues are about events before Ashura, some of them about during Ashura, some of the things about after Ashura. So inaccuracies are, in different parts. And he says, you people are also responsible. One is because Nahi anil munkar, to prohibit the evil, is responsibility of everyone. So you should not accept when something is said which has no document, no authority, no chain, no reference. Another thing is that you people sometimes, or many times, you somehow put people on pressure to say something that you cry. And then he says, then some people think that in order to make people cry, they have to, change things or, exaggerate or whatever. And he says, this is also a problem. He says one of ulama in one of the cities, not in the Hose, but in one of the cities, he says he was very sad. Why some zakir or some maddah, they say things which are not correct, and he used to call these inaccuracies zahramar. Zahramar means poison of snake. But in Farsi, we use it also sometimes to say something is very dirty or very bad, bitter. So he used to say to people, why you add Zahramar to this member, Then he himself organized a majlis in his masjid and sat close to member and said to the zakir, I am sitting here, be very careful, don't say anything wrong, and start. So this person started and was only saying things which are in the book, nothing extra. And then he saw people are like frozen. The people were not crying. So he secretly said, add a little Zahramar. Add a little of that poison. It means say something so that they cry. So this is very sad that sometimes people, they think the priority is emotion. The priority is not emotion. Yes, it's very good to be emotional. It's very good to be able to cry. Even if you, shed a little tear is great. But you don't need to go to, things which are not real in order to do that. Actually, Ayatullah Mutahhari says, a story of Karbala is one of the exceptional stories that we have so much information about it that if someone is well read, doesn't need to fabricate anything. because this is reported from the beginning by different groups of people. Members of Ahlul Bayt have reported. People who were present on the side of Imam alayhi salam have reported. Even sometimes people in the opposite army have reported. There are lots of letters from Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Letters also between, for example, Yazid, Ibn Ziyad, writings are there. Speeches which are given are there. Rajaz is what they used to, recite in battle. When someone was going to the battlefield, so they were expressing their ideas. Like, today they issue a statement. At that time was verbal. Who am I? Why I am here? What is my reason? This is called Rajaz. So he says we have so much evidence that there is no need for adding anything. And as I said, alhamdulillah, in the last several decades, many good work have been done and great improvement has been done. He mentions some examples. He says, Mirza Hussain Noori says in beginning of this discussion, and he says, I have myself also heard this. They say that one day Amirul Mu'mineen was on minbar, sitting on minbar and giving speech. Imam Hussein said, I am thirsty. And then they say, Amirul Mu'mineen said, someone should go and bring water for my son. The first person who stood up was Hazrat Abbas. And he went and took some water. And when he was coming, he was carrying water on his head. And water was also pouring. And when Amirul Mu'mineen saw this, cried. And they said, why you are crying? And then he said, I was reminded of Karbala. So, Haji Noori says, you say Amirul Mu'mineen was on minbar giving sermon. Amirul Mu'mineen only went on minbar when he was Khalifa. During the time of Rasulullah, he was not going on minbar. During the time of first, second, third Khalifa, he was not going on minbar. All the khutbah of Amirul Mu'mineen only for 5 years. Yeah? Only those 5 years he gave khutbah. So, this means that it was between 36 to 41 after Hijrah. At that time, Amirul Mu'mineen was Khalifa and Imam Hussein was some 30 years old. Mm-hmm. Is it possible a man who is 30 years old says, to his father who is giving lecture, I need water? And even Hazrat Abbas at that time was not a child. So he was about 15 years old. He was not a child, was not able to carry water. So he says, this cannot be true. But what type of image we are giving to people? That, Imam Hussein, for example, as a man, Of course, those who say this, they maybe don't say that he was a, man at that time. Maybe they don't think about details. I don't know. Anyway, this is one story that he mentions, and he says this doesn't make sense. Or he says, one person who had taken some letters from Kufa to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and he asked for response. And Imam Hussein said, come after 3 days and take your response. He went after 3 days and they told him that Imam Hussein alayhi salam is now moving from Mecca, and he's moving. So he said, let me see how Imam Hussein's situation is. He saw that Imam, according to what they say, was sitting on a chair which was decorated with jewelries, and they had in their caravan, which they were going to carry lots of clothes from silk, and they want to say that like he was like a king, and and was traveling with the queens, and they had all these jewelries and silk, etc. But then they say, but what happened on the day of Ashura? So they want to shift to say from where they reached this. He says, but this is not the case. When Imam Hussein alayhi salam was leaving, he was leaving in a very, very simple way. First of all, he was in a condition like Musa alayhi salam. خَرَجَ مِنْهَا خَائِفًا يَتَرَقَّبْ. He recited, ayah 21 of Surah Al-Qasas, that he was leaving because he was not safe. It's not that the king was moving, and he was very simple. Why you want to explain greatness of Imam Hussein by using jewelries and silk and this kind of things? Or he talks about the story of Hazrat Ali Akbar and his mother Layla. He says, according to his research, the mother of Ali Akbar was not present in Karbala. And he says, I was myself in a majlis and someone recited this kind of majlis about Hazrat Layla and Hazrat Ali Akbar, that she said, because they say, Imam Hussein said, to the mother of Ali Akbar, pray to God to save him. And then they say that Hazrat Layla said this, نَذْرٌ عَلَيَّ لَإِنْ عَادَ وَإِنْ رَجَعُوا لَأَزْرَعَنَّ طَرِيقَ تَفِّ الرَّيْحَانَ. So he says, this person recited this poem, which means that if they return safely, I am going to plant Rayhan. Rayhan in Arabic sometimes means flower, but in Farsi also means basil. Yeah. So he said, if they return safely, I'm going to plant Rayhan for all the way from Karbala to Medina, which is 300 farsakh. He said, when I searched to find out where this Arabic, because Arabic, so it's not possible to easily fabricate by Iranian, for example, Farsi speaker. So he says, when I searched, I realized this was not about Layla, mother of Ali Akbar, but it was Layla and Majnoon. From the story of Layla and Majnoon, this was taken. So he says, when a non-Muslim hears, for example, or non-Shia hears this, what do they think about, Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, that going to plant, for hundreds of kilometers Rayhan. So also he mentions some other stories. For example, he says sometimes they mention some companions of Imam Hussein, some people, that they don't exist. For example, he says in a book, Muhriqul Qulub. Muhriq means burns. This book burns the hearts. He says, actually, the writer is an alim, but he was not expert in this field. He says, one of the companions of Imam Hussein was Hashim Mirqal. Hashim ibn Utbay Mirqal. And he had a spear which was about 20 meters. He says, when you read the history, you realize Hashim ibn Mirqal was a companion of Amirul Mu'minin. He was killed 20 years before Karbala. He didn't exist at that time, let alone carrying a spear which is 20 meters. You know, can you move something if it is 20 meters? He says in the book Asrar al-Shahada, it says in Karbala there were 1,600,000 soldiers in the army of Umar Sa'ad. It says 1,600,000 people. Where did they come? And he says Imam Hussein himself killed 300,000 people. He says, I counted, even if killing each person takes 1 second, then it needs 83 hours, 20 minutes. If just, 1 second every person. Doesn't make sense. Or they say, Hazrat Abul Faz killed 25,000 people. He says, it takes 6 hours, some 50 minutes, if just each takes 1 second. So he says we should believe in what Mirza Nuri says, that if you want to cry for Imam Hussein today, we should cry for his mazlumiyya from the side of such people. He also refutes the idea of the wedding of Hazrat Qasim. And he says, in that situation on the day of Ashura, how it possible that, they say, Imam Hussein said, I have the desire to see the wedding of you, He said, even an ordinary person don't think like that. And he says, look at Hazrat Qasim. In the night of Ashura, when Imam Hussein alayhi salam told, he was, with his companions, and he told them that tomorrow we are going to die. And, he said, they want me, you can go. As you know, Hazrat Abul Faz, Bani Hashim, then others, they all said, we are not going to leave you. And some of them say, if they kill us 70 times, we are going to remain here. Some said, if we are killed and burnt and revived again and again, we are not going to leave you. And then he said, Hazrat Qasim, because he was very young, he was like a teenager, he was sitting behind, and he was concerned that maybe this is only for men, not for him. So he asked, وَأَنَا فِي مَنْ يُقْتَلْ, am I one of those who will be killed? And Imam Hussein didn't first say yes or no. First ask him, how is death for you? كَيْفَ الْمَوْتُ عِنْدَكَ? And he said, أَحْلَى مِنَ الْعَسَلِ, it's more sweet and more enjoyable than honey. And then Imam Hussein alayhi salam said, yes, but بعد أن تبلغ ببلاء عظيم, but you will be killed after great test, great bala, calamity. Okay? And when he went on the day of Ashura for battle, as you know how hard he worked to get permission from Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And also he went because he was not very tall or whatever. There was no like shield or helmet for him, so he went with ordinary clothes. Even he didn't have boots, he had just some shoes. So he was such a brave person and such a devotee person who says shahada for him, martyrdom, is more sweet than honey. Then he says, why we reduce him to a person who wants to get married in that situation? Or think Imam Hussein is like some people who say, I only want to see the wedding of my children and then die. He says, this is not the mentality of, even ordinary mu'minin, like, pious people that we have, let alone Imam alayhi salam. He says, we are bringing down the level of Hazrat Qasim, Imam Hussein, everyone, by not being careful about what we say. So we, alhamdulillah, completed the first part of the book, and I want to say that alhamdulillah, the situation has very much improved. I'm not saying everything is perfect, but alhamdulillah, great work has been taking place in the last several decades. Lots of scholarly books are available. In the past was also available, but now more and more and in different languages. So today we have no excuse, because you can easily find, even on internet, books, sources. Even if you are not an expert, you can find books by scholars. As long as what you say is written in a book by scholars, then at least you can say, I have done my responsibility. I didn't quote something just I heard, somewhere, or when I was a child, I was told this. We have to improve our, inshallah, majalis, our majalis of morning, and inshallah we will continue. I hope no one feel offended, no one feels that anyone tries to take away majalis or azab about this. Is only to improve, purify, and make our majalis something that would be suitable and would match great character of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. No matter how much you try, still you can improve to reach the level that is suitable to serve this mission of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.